Hejsan allihopa!
Hi everyone.
How are you doing? Hope you're fine.
So yeah, today is part 2 of Johns Hopkins legal representative giving their opening statements. Just can't even. There's in the description. There's going to be a link to the full day of day 1 if you want to watch it without any interruptions. I mean, we're not going to interrupt, and unless it's particularly egregious. And there's also going to be a link for the Reddit thread that I used to look this up. If you want to have a look at that, if you want to, find what witness you actually want to look for and watch, there you go. That'll be that. Yeah, we're gonna watch the rest of it of this idiot's opening statement.
Yeah.
So yeah, should we get on with it?
Oh yeah.
Indeed, when she was discharged, the court of this circuit, not this judge.
Objection.
Basis. What's the legal basis?
Motion to eliminate.
I don't recall that one. Continue.
Directed her discharge. She could not be discharged without an order of the court. And she was discharged with instructions as to what medication she could have at that time. She could not have ketamine. She could not have heavy analgesics without the court's intervention. That matter was dismissed several months later after she did well in her father's custody. And she's free to get whatever she wants today. For the present, let me just mention this. I'll deal more with it. You'll hear a lot more about it. Once the court entered an order following a report of child abuse that she was to be sheltered at all children's under the custody of the Department of Children and Families, All Children's Hospital did not have the ability to discharge her without court approval, even if it wanted to. You're going to hear evidence. You're going to hear evidence from DCF personnel who will tell you we're the ones that set the visitation parameters. We're the ones that decreed who she could see, when she could see them, what she could have in her room, what she would have access to. The hospital, unfortunately, was put in the position of having to implement those orders. That's what we tried to do. Throughout this case, we're going to ask you to try to avoid conflating what was done by the court or ordered by the court with what was done by the hospital. Because the hospital's not the court. The hospital's not DCF. The hospital has to follow that. And the hospital doesn't institute that. The court and DCF do. Now, I digress a little bit there, but I want you to pay attention, I'm sure you will, to what the evidence will show regarding Maya Kowalski's condition today. If she's not the head of her class at Venice High School, she's real close. She served in her student government. She works out. She's on track to get a high school diploma and an AA degree on time. She's dating. She's functional. She walks unassisted. She's not taking pain medication. To some appearance, she's doing very well, and we hope it stays that way. Now let's walk back the clock once again to October 7th, 2017. At that time, we described somewhat what happened in the emergency room. You're going to hear more about that from nurse witnesses. Maya Kowalski was admitted to the PICU. We talked about that. Dr. Beatrice Tepa-Sanchez was the one on duty that night. You'll see what her credentials were. She'll tell you what her credentials are and her board certification in pediatrics and intensive medicine. She will tell you that what she did was attempt to understand what was going on with this child. And you'll see her, and you'll hear her walk through her admission history and physical, and the research that she did into the records that were available to her at All Children's of previous encounters. You'll see her discharge summary, and you'll see the care that she took to track down what this patient's history was. And you'll see that when she did that, and she was able to get the child admitted and sedated and started stabilizing, that she did call appropriate consultations. She did get pain management and anesthesiology involved. She did call psychiatry. And because of her concern, you'll hear that she also called a pediatric child abuse expert, Dr. Sally Smith. You'll hear Dr. Smith is the head, the medical director of the Child Protection Team, the CPT, for DCF, the Division of Family Services, or excuse me, the Department of Children and Families. I just gave away my age, by the way. They used to call it the 70s. But in any event, you'll hear she contacted Dr. Smith to say, basically, I'm not sure what's going on here. Can you check this out? And you'll hear that Dr. Smith did. You'll hear that Dr. Smith was not an employee of All Children's Hospital, that she was not part of the treatment team, but she was there as a resource. And you'll see over time, and we'll talk about this again in a minute, the investigation that she conducted in connection with her duties with DCF and the Child Protection Team. She was not an employee of All Children's and never held herself out as such. And you may hear from Mr. and Mrs. Kowalski themselves that they knew that from day one. Now, I mentioned that Dr. Sanchez got her colleagues involved. One of those colleagues you'll hear from is Dr. Richard Elliott. Dr. Elliott is a board-certified anesthesiology in pediatrics. He will be here and testify about what he found, what his interactions with Mrs. Kowalski were, and how he believed this child needed to be weaned off of high-dose medication and weaned off of the regimen that she had been on. You'll also hear from Dr. Jenny Dolan. She's in the same discipline. She too had interactions. And you'll hear from both those doctors that during the time they were caring for this patient, they were having a problem with what Mrs. Kowalski wanted. Mrs. Kowalski wanted an intrathecal pain pump placed in her daughter's spine to deliver a medication called clonidine, powerful drug, into her spinal canal. She was told that was a bad idea by the doctors at All Children's. She was told the same thing by doctors at Nemours. Indeed, you're going to hear Dr. Kirkpatrick tell her that's a bad idea. She was insistent upon asking for that over and over. She was talking about taking her daughter back to Mexico and Italy for more high-dose ketamine that she had just come off of, and that the doctors at All Children's felt weren't working, and frankly, we would suggest the evidence suggests weren't working. The plan of care the doctors wanted to pursue was consultation, weaning of the medications, appropriate care, and ultimately transfer. Now I'm going to go past the slide on Dr. Smith here and go fast forward here because I want to talk about several specific allegations that have to do with the sequence of events from this point forward in the case and what the evidence is going to show you about that sequence of events. This child was admitted with a consent form agreeing to treatment signed off by Mr. Kowalski on October 7th of 2016. By that Sunday, the family, particularly Mrs. Kowalski, wanted to leave. They were being dissuaded from that. They'll tell you that on the morning of October 10th or 11th, that they were told they couldn't leave. I'm going to invite you to listen to what the evidence will show about that encounter. Because we believe the evidence will show, and you'll hear Mr. Kowalski say that no one ever told him he could not leave All Children's Hospital. We believe the evidence will also show that at that time, with the threats being made by the mother to find more high-dose, dangerous ketamine, that it was reasonable and warranted for the doctors to decline that if they had chosen to do so. We don't believe they did. We think that the evidence is more persuasive and shows you that there was a convocation of folks on the morning of October 10th or 11th at which there was discussion of the plan, there was a discussion of the weaning, there was a discussion of stabilization, the plan being, let's get her weaned off this medication safely, and then let's transfer her to an institution where more intensive physical therapy, more intensive behavioral therapy, and more intensive occupational therapy is available. The evidence will show you that All Children's Hospital was not trying to imprison this young lady. We were trying to get her stabilized and transferred to somewhere where she could get the help that she needed. And you're going to see that that somewhere was identified by Dr. Michelle Smith and others as Nemours Children's Hospital. A brief look at Dr. Smith's qualifications. You're going to hear from her from the witness stand. Dr. Smith is presently our chief of staff. She's also a board-certified pediatrician and intensivist. She came into this case on October 9th, and she virtually from the outset began discussing with Mrs. Kowalski transfer of the patient. Now, there's her plan of care. That's what she wanted to pursue. And she tried to get it done with a transfer from PICU to Nemours. She felt at the time that if she transferred the child to Nemours, an intensive pain management program could begin while the child was still an inpatient. Nemours declined the transfer. She didn't stop, though. So I'm going to skip past this slide because we pretty much covered it. She didn't stop. After that discussion at which the family agreed to stay, and you're going to see multiple sources of documentation of that, after that discussion, she took it upon herself to call Nemours again. And she called a doctor named Lisgelia Santana Rojas. You're going to hear that Dr. Santana Rojas, and you're going to hear from her, we believe, by Zoom. You're going to hear Dr. Santana Rojas verify what she was told, or what she told Mrs. Kowalski, and what Dr. Smith will say she told Mrs. Kowalski. And that's basically this. She said that Nemours wouldn't take a transfer for inpatient, but that Dr. Santana Rojas operated an outpatient pain management clinic, specializing in pediatrics because that's all Nemours does, just like all children. All we treat is pediatrics, all they treat is pediatrics. In their pain management program, they treat CRPS. You'll hear Dr. Santana Rojas describe that she told Mrs. Kowalski that. You'll hear her say that she was asked by Mrs. Kowalski, if I go over there, if I come to your program, will you put in an intrathecal pain pump? And Dr. Santana Rojas said, no, we won't do that. That's not part of our program. That's dangerous. It's against your daughter's interest. But what we will do, without ketamine, without analgesic, what we will do is give her intensive physical, occupational, and behavioral therapy, and I'm going to replicate with her the program I trained in at Boston Children's Hospital, Harvard Medical School. I've replicated that program here, and we're getting very good results. If you bring your daughter over here as an outpatient, we'll put her in our program. You hear Dr. Smith pretty much tell you the same thing. I'm not sure what Dr. Santana Rojas is going to say about this, but I know what Dr. Smith's going to say. And it's this. Dr. Smith left the hospital that day thinking she had a deal. She thought, okay, we're going to get this child weaned and stable, and then we're going to transfer her as an outpatient in her family's custody to Nemours pain management. Now, as you hear the evidence come in, you are going to see that at this point, on October 11th, 2016, there had been a report accepted to DCF. There had been an investigation started, but nothing really had taken place. There had not been a dependency petition filed. There had been no court order. The court hadn't denied the Kowalski's access to their daughter. They hadn't done anything. At this point, on October 11th, All Children's Hospital and its staff were attempting to facilitate Mr. and Mrs. Kowalski taking their daughter out of All Children's Hospital in their custody and taking her as an outpatient for treatment at Nemours. We suggest to you that if that had happened, we would not be together today. We're going to suggest to you that the evidence will show that if that had happened, it's reasonable to think that none of this would have occurred. We believe that had that occurred, this entire matter could have been sidetracked and never brought us together. But that's not what happened. Because the next morning, when Dr. Smith arrived back at the hospital, she found that Mrs. Kowalski wanted to take Maya Kowalski to Dr. Hanna for more ketamine, that she wanted to seek an intrathecal pain catheter elsewhere, that she wanted to obtain more ketamine elsewhere, and that there was still discussion of Mexico or Italy. Shortly after that, there was a shelter order. At that point, the circumstances under which Maya was a patient at All Children's were not dictated by the hospital, they were dictated by the court and DCF. Now, the situation proceeded with the weaning completed at All Children's. All Children's, the evidence will show, attempted to get this child the physical therapy on an inpatient basis that it could provide. We didn't think it was enough, but we did what we could. She got some behavioral therapy, although not the kind that she needed. We didn't have it available. That's why we wanted to transfer her. But you'll see as you go forward and you hear witness after witness and you look in the hospital chart, you're going to see that over and over and over again, we weren't warehousing this child voluntarily. You'll see it noted over and over. Medically cleared for discharge, awaiting court disposition. At the close of all the evidence, we'll tote up for you the number of times that appears in the record. But we're going to suggest to you the evidence is going to be conclusive that there was never any false imprisonment of this child at All Children's Hospital. Now, I want to talk, before I get into disease versus syndrome and problems with diagnosis, I want to talk about a couple other things. One is the matter of a battery and surveillance. We believe the evidence is going to show you that whenever there was a touching of Maya Kowalski, it was done for therapeutic or clinical reasons or to comfort a child. There was never any intent to do her any harm. There was never any intent to be offensive or harmful. And we believe that at the end of all the evidence, you're going to find that there was never any point at which a reasonable person would have taken offense at how she was touched and how her care was managed in that regard. We need to talk a minute about the problems with diagnosis here. You're going to hear a lot about CRPS, conversion disorder, and a number of other things. CRPS and conversion disorder and these mental diagnoses have a couple of things that are significant about them. One is that they aren't diseases in the sense that doctors use that term concretely. A disease is something you can see and you can diagnose, and there isn't any question about it. Appendicitis, most forms of cancer. There's the lab test that proves it or disproves it. If you have HIV, there's a lab test for it. If you have appendicitis, there's an imaging study that shows a hot appendix. Objective. Syndromes aren't like that. In a syndrome, you piece together a constellation of symptoms and a constellation of findings, and it's much more subjective. And that's why we have things like the Budapest criteria that counsel talked about, and you're going to hear a lot about that going forward. In this particular case, you're going to hear that there was a good deal of controversy about what this diagnosis was. When this patient came into All Children's, we did in fact admit her with a diagnosis of CRPS. And we continued to bill for that and to treat that, and we tried to transfer her with that diagnosis. But as time went on, for the same reason that CRPS was not suspected at Tampa General or at Lurie's or elsewhere, we questioned the diagnosis. And while the diagnosis was carried forward as a rule-out, it was not the discharge diagnosis, although we noted in the discharge summary that it was never ruled out. Now, you're going to hear much about CRPS, but I'm going to skip past this slide because we kind of covered this. You are going to hear a lot about CRPS's rarity, and you're going to hear a lot of reasons given why we didn't believe this is CRPS. One reason was that it was presenting as a general pain syndrome involving the entire body. What's the name of the syndrome? Chronic regional pain syndrome. Doesn't usually present as whole body. You're going to hear that's vanishingly rare, if not almost unheard of. You're also going to hear that there were various presentation factors about this disease that were never really observed on a consistent basis, like decrease or hair loss, nail changes, skin asymmetric tissue changes in the skin. A lot of these observations about CRPS just weren't consistently present. There were, however, reasons to suspect conversion disorder. Now we've arrived at psychiatric or psychological issues. There's a lot of misconceptions about psychology and psychiatry and mental illness. And people act like saying it's conversion disorder or it's all in your head is some kind of epitaph. It's an insult. And that's not the case. When these doctors are writing down conversion disorder, they weren't trying to insult somebody. They were trying to attach a suspicion and a diagnosis to get a patient the help they needed. No one's telling this patient she doesn't have pain. What they're saying is, what their question is, what's causing it, and what you do about it. And that's the central issue here in many respects, because this entire case revolves around not so much what the diagnosis is, but what the clinical treatment is. And I've got a slide here in a minute that will show you this, that I'll probably skip when we get to it because now I'm taking it out of order. Because as usual in an opening statement, I'm way off the reservation from what I'm supposed to be doing in order. But since it's appropriate, I'll say it here. When you look and when you hear what the evidence is about the reasonable standard of care treatment for CRPS, for conversion disorder, for a pain syndrome manifesting as Munchausen by proxy, for factitious disorder manifesting as a pain syndrome, when you hear what the treatment is, the clinical treatment is for all those things, same thing. Maybe the mix differs, but it's basically physical therapy, occupational therapy, and psychological or cognitive behavioral therapy. Those are the treatments. And you're going to hear from experts who treat this disease day in, day out, and these diseases, I should say, all of them, day in, day out, and they do it without putting the patient in a coma, without giving the patient 15, 20 times the recommended dose of ketamine over months and months and months. They do it by therapy, and the results they get are stellar. And you'll hear that from them. You'll also hear that for that same set of reasons, this business about billing just isn't supported by the evidence. You're going to see the billing records. You're going to see the billing sheets. You're going to see that CRPS was an item. It was one of a number of items that was being billed for. You're going to hear that there was no change in the medical reimbursement for the billing as a result of where, in what place, whether it's 1 or 12, and that's literally how many diagnoses there were that points in this, whether it was the first diagnosis or the 6th or the 8th or the 10th, you're going to hear that the billing reimbursement never changed. And the reason for that was that while you needed a diagnosis to put on that code, what was really being billed for was the services rendered. And you'll see the billing sheets and the services that are laid out item by item, and you'll see that those didn't change either. You'll also hear that none of this cost Mr. Kowalski a dime. And you'll also hear that the insurer who was billed for the services rendered by All Children's Hospital for 3 months of inpatient therapy, the insurer never complained. Didn't say a word. Approved the care, approved the billing, no problem. Now, you're going to hear a lot about Munchausen by proxy, and I'm going to kind of fast forward through this for one reason, that we're running a little bit low on time, but the other reason is that it's a very technical thing, and it doesn't merit near the attention that it's gotten because it's been a flashpoint throughout this. There was a suspicion of Munchausen by proxy. It wasn't just All Children's suspicion. There was a concern that part of this child's condition was being fostered or encouraged by the mother. There was a concern that the mother was seeking out care that was too aggressive, that was dangerous, and would persist in doing so if she were permitted to do so. That's what got this ball rolling. And I told you a few minutes ago what the evidence will show about the attempt to transfer for outpatient care, why it failed, and why, as a result of that, these investigations rolled forward. This is a slide I told you I'm going to skip because this talks about what the therapy is and how it is all of them. We talked about billing fraud, so I'm going to skip over this slide as well. Let me talk about photographs for a minute. You've heard about the photos that were taken. These photos were taken for clinical reasons. We believe the evidence will show you that they were taken pursuant to the consent that Mr. Kowalski signed when he was admitted, and which he will, I believe, admit to you he never rescinded. Purpose of the photos was to document the condition of the child. If there were skin lesions, even if they were not being documented in the nursing notes, they needed to be documented, they needed to be observed if they got worse. If there were new ones developing, we need to know that too. But the point is that they were being taken to assist in diagnosis and follow the child's condition. You heard about surveillance, the movie, surveillance video. You're going to hear that wasn't a new idea either. That also happened at Tampa General. Why was it done? Because medical professionals wanted to know what the child's capabilities were. Now, that video is going to tell you you're going to see, we're not going to ask you to watch 42 hours of video. But you're going to see grabs from that video that show several things from our standpoint. You're going to hear some of the plaintiff links. From our standpoint, you're going to see in that video that Maya Kowalski, who's saying her legs are hypersensitive and can't be touched, saying she can't move her legs, is moving her legs in bed, moving her legs into a position that we used to call Indian style, and now we call crisscross applesauce. She was able to assume that position and hold that position voluntarily without a problem. You're also going to see and get some idea of the fact that she was not in that room for 42 hours. You'll see that she's in and out. She went to therapy, she went to other places. And you'll see the nurses coming and going and assisting her when indicated to the commode. The commode wasn't placed out of her reach for any kind of malicious purpose. It was placed in the position that it was because she had nursing staff available to help her, as you'll see they did, and because if you put it too close or in too close position to the bedside, it would obstruct the nurse's ability to get to the bed. It was strictly a matter of happenstance. It was not a matter of intent. And that brings me to another point, and it's on this slide. You're not going to hear any evidence that the 50-some-odd medical doctors and professionals who took care of Maya Kowalski over 3 months somehow banded together in some sort of cabal and hatched a plot or a conspiracy to do harm. You're just not going to hear that. You're instead going to hear from a constellation of dedicated pediatricians and dedicated specialists who were genuinely trying to do the right thing for this patient. They may have differed in some opinions with the family, but their uppermost objective was to keep this child safe and to get this child the therapy and the treatment that she needed. Now, why was the diagnosis an issue if the treatment was the same? That's a reasonable question. Let me suggest to you the evidence is, and will be, that the importance of the diagnosis is the result of the fact that CRPS diagnosis was being used to justify dangerous care, dangerous levels of ketamine and other drugs that aren't even recognized in the literature. Those doctors weren't going to come get the patient. The family's going to take the patient to those doctors. And so it was important to get the diagnosis straight and the treatment straight so that the right mix of therapy could be formulated and the best job could be done to get Maya Kowalski into a position of being comfortable, functional, and lead a happy and healthy life. That's what we were attempting to do. There's never an intent to do anything but that. Over the next few weeks, we think you're going to hear a number of experts in the courtroom. We'll be bringing in experts from California and elsewhere. They're going to talk to you about whether or not the overarching allegation against all Children's and its physicians, including even Sally Smith, that they were negligent in Maya Kowalski's care and that their negligence somehow caused injury. We're going to suggest to you that, first of all, there was no ultimate injury caused, given the condition that she was given to us in. But more importantly, there was no deviation from the standard of care. You're going to hear from different doctors in different specialties that the care that was taken in diagnosing and treating Maya Kowalski, you're going to hear about teams of consultants, you're going to hear about meticulous investigations. You can see that Sally Smith formulated a 45-page single-space report of her review of literally thousands of medical records to come up with her diagnosis, you're going to see a lot of effort and care and expertise went in to the effort made to treat this child at Johns Hopkins Children's Hospital. We believe the evidence will be unequivocal. But that degree of effort, insight, investigation, and monitoring and care comported in every respect with what is reasonable and what is recognized as being reasonable and appropriate by other similar physicians. And we don't believe you're going to hear any credible evidence otherwise. You heard the judge give you a definition of medical negligence. I just kind of paraphrased it. But the point I'm making to you is the evidence will ultimately show that these doctors and these nurses and this hospital staff acted reasonably and prudently to treat a difficult and challenging case they were presented with, and they did it consistently over 3 months. They don't have to be right under the law. All they have to be is reasonable. We will suggest to you the evidence will show that, first, they probably were right. But even if they weren't, they were more than reasonable. At the end of all this, at the end of all the evidence, I'll have another chance to visit with you, or my colleague, Mr. Shapiro, will. You're going to hear a lot between now and then. And again, I appreciate very much your attentiveness and your diligence, as does my client and people at All Children's Hospital. I thank you for your attention and look forward to working with you the next few weeks. And you'll be pleased to know I skipped at least 3 slides. Thank you.
Right, so a few things from that. I have a question. If they thought that there was possible child abuse by medical child abuse, why would they then agree to release Maya under her parents' care to another hospital if they thought it was Munchausen by proxy? Why would they do that?
Yeah.
If they legitimately thought that Maya's well-being was at risk. It doesn't make sense. It wouldn't.
No. Also the fact that they also had a son, so why wouldn't they investigate that? But they didn't.
Well, no, not the hospital, but the social workers.
Yeah. No, also the fact one thing that grinded me there when he said that they were trying to the best to do when they were holding her and so on for comforting her.
Yeah, there was no battery.
Yeah. I mean, the picture we see videos before.
Yeah, a young, a 10-year-old girl, yeah, sure, even just a 10-year-old child, yeah, sure, they want random strangers holding their arms down and taking their clothes off and taking pictures of them. Absolutely, that's what all 10-year-old children want. Didn't you? Like, what the fuck are they on about?
Yeah, is that their way of comforting children? Then no, they shouldn't have any. They should not deal with any kind of children at that children's hospital.
Well, it's just like, it's basically like if they don't believe that Maya has CRPS, why would they still bill her for CRPS?
Yeah, and why should they keep her there for?
I mean, it really does raise the question, if they put a shelter order in place, why was Kyle left at home? Like,
Yeah.
Why was he left at home? Why was he allowed to be around his mother, who was the main reason as to why Maya couldn't go back home?
Yeah.
And if it's Munchausen by proxy, this is most likely my ignorance coming into play here. But if this was a case of Munchausen by proxy, why was there nothing on Kyle, and why was the father allowing it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what?
No, they're talking out of their asses.
And the fact also that they said after a year she had lost 4.5 pounds and that she was apparently malnourished, and whilst being in the hospital for 3 months she gained 4 pounds. Yeah, feeding tube will do that if you're she's clearly not moving around that much, so she's not burning off any energy. She's not burning off any calories. And I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if they had a high calorie, high nutrition, high calorie density, just having it, like high calorie, so nutritionally dense or something like that.
Yeah.
Where it's like I remember, I've got a picture in my head. I can't remember what it is. It's basically like kind of like the stuff that they give to starving children.
Yeah.
People that are starving because their bodies can't handle that much food.
Yeah.
But you need to get basically crap in them. Like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But it's just like she lost 4.5 pounds in a year. Okay. Were you taking weighs? Were you weighing her every week or every other week or once a month? No, you just looked at that one bit. It would not surprise me if they ignored where she'd gained weight.
Oh yeah, most probably.
And I mean, it's also, you can speak to this, they're also ignoring the fact that whenever you get a treatment, it's not going to be 100% foolproof.
No.
Like, for example, with your ADHD and Ritalin,
Yeah.
does it, like, when you take Ritalin, do you have to take it, like, every day?
I'm not on the Ritalin right now, but when I took it, it's
Do you take it every day?
every day.
Yeah.
Every day.
So the ADHD episodes, did they stop at all?
No, they are most what's called decreased. It's more ADHD pills that I take for that's match for me is to keep what's it called again, the psychological energy, keep it running a bit longer, kind of.
Yeah.
But as soon as the pill's effect goes out, it drops. It's a big drop.
Yeah. So you get mental fatigue more often.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I still have my ADHD moments. I still have thoughts of running around and so on. It doesn't cure it 100%. It just decreases
well,
it.
then clearly it's not appropriate medication for you, and you might be all making it up in your head.
Yeah.
According to Johns Hopkins.
Oh yeah. So.
And I'm very confused as to why someone she goes by doctor, but she's not a doctor. She has a PhD. Why Dr. Sally Smith, who's not a doctor by training, she's not got a PhD in medicine or anything like that. Why is she the one that's deciding on what Maya's medical care should be?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Like, for me, the fact that they were like, oh yeah, no, you can go to Moore's Hospital as an outpatient. Okay, so child abuse, that didn't exist then. Why I don't. There's so many. This opening statement by Johns Hopkins, it's awful. It's awful. I've got so many questions, and it's just like. It's just like, it just doesn't make sense. Why would you think that there's child abuse, but then go, yeah, no, sure, we'll put you in her, we'll let her go in your custody to another hospital as an outpatient.
Yeah.
And then why would the parents not do that? What would be the reason? Would there be a gag order in place, or would they have to sign some sort of paperwork that they won't ever sue the hospital, and that's why they didn't leave? I don't know. Or would they have to sign a bit of paper saying, yeah, no, she doesn't have CRPS, it's all in our minds, we're crazy.
Mm-hmm. The
It's just, I don't get it. Like, what? This guy's an idiot.
yeah.
And also the fact that she moved into the surveillance room fairly early before the shelter order, didn't she?
Yeah. I think they say that. Yeah.
But why would they move her to the surveillance room then?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question.
Like, he's trying to say the hospital they were only essentially the vessel and taking orders from the court. I'm really sorry if you're a judge, but how the fuck why the fuck would a judge know what medical care should be done? Oh yeah, he'd get reports from a woman who's not medically trained. Like, she's not a doctor. She's an overpaid administrator. That's what she is. I'm sorry if you had that job title, but that's what she is. She's a pencil pusher that's got too much of an ego and has too many zeros on her paycheck. I hope she's fucking fired. Although they're probably not, because they
Probably got a payment increased. Because
I don't understand how they haven't even apologized.
Oh no,
They still think what they did was right.
they never gonna apologize for that. Probably still doing it as well.
Oh yeah, it would not surprise me if they were still doing it.
Oh.
Absolutely atrocious.
Oh,
Be
yeah.
ashamed of themselves.
Yeah. No, they can't do. They can't.
They don't know what that word means.
Oh no.
Well, no, they do, but lesser people.
No,
feel
yeah.
that. They don't. They're above people, don't you know?
Oh yeah.
But yeah, thank you for watching. If you got this far, we're gonna go. So the next time we'll come back to this. I think there's some court matters after this because it's not the end, but that'll be in the next video. So hopefully we'll see you for that. If not, then enjoy whatever you do. Leave a comment if you want to. Leave a like if you want to. I mean, hell, you can even subscribe if you want to. You don't have to. It's not a requirement. But yeah, we're gonna head off. So don't eat yellow snow. Stay hydrated, but not by yellow snow, clearly. And stay moisturized.
And beware of the seagulls.
Car beach.
Caw.
Bye, guys.
Bye bye.